10-year-old Liam Carter walked alone down Jefferson Avenue, his sneakers scuffing against the cracked pavement. The old streetlights flickered above, barely holding back the darkness stretching between them. His backpack, filled with second-hand textbooks, weighed heavy on his shoulder. It was late, later than his grandma would like. But he had taken the long way home, avoiding Tyrone and his crew, the older kids who liked to mess with younger ones like him. As Liam neared Hollow Creek Curve, the most dangerous bend in the neighborhood, the usual sounds of the city, dogs barking, distant car horns, were replaced by something unnatural. A deep, metallic groan. Then, a sharp crunch, like metal being twisted apart. Liam froze. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. A few yards ahead, beyond the bend, a set of headlights flashed wildly before disappearing off the road. Then, boom. A deafening collision shattered the night. Liam's stomach clenched. He knew he shouldn't get involved. His grandma always told him, "Mind your own business, Liam. This world ain't built for kids like us to play hero." But something inside him, something deeper than fear, pushed him forward. He took off running. If this story grabs your attention, make sure to subscribe to RVM Black Struggles for more powerful storytelling like this. And hey, if you're already feeling the tension, hit that like button. The smell of burnt rubber and leaking fuel filled his nose as he reached the wreckage. A sleek black sedan lay on its side, crushed against an old oak tree. Smoke curled from beneath the hood. Shattered glass sparkled on the pavement like fallen stars. Then he heard it. A voice, so faint he almost missed it. A girl's voice. Liam dropped his backpack and sprinted toward the car. Through the spider-webbed windshield, he spotted her, a teenage girl, barely conscious, blood streaking her forehead. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Hey! Hey! Can you hear me?" Liam shouted, pressing his hands against the glass. No response. His hands shook, but he didn't think, he just acted. What happens next? If you're hooked, let us know. Comment 1 if you want to see more stories like this, 0 if it's not your style, or just hit that subscribe button if you don't have an opinion but love great storytelling. Liam scrambled to the driver's side. The door was crumpled, its handle buried beneath twisted metal. He yanked with all his strength. Nothing. His palms burned as the jagged edges cut into his skin. The smoke was thickening. The engine hissed. Time was slipping away. Liam darted to the broken passenger window, his small frame barely fitting through the opening. He reached inside, his arms scraping against glass, but he ignored the sting. His fingers found fabric, her sleeve. "I got you," he murmured. The girl stirred, letting out a weak groan. Liam braced his feet and pulled. She barely moved. Desperate, he grabbed a loose piece of metal from the wreckage and slammed it against the windshield. Crack. Again. Crack. On the third hit, a chunk of glass caved inward. His fingers found her arm again. "You gotta move," he pleaded. The girl moaned, her body shifting. He yanked harder, harder than he thought possible. Suddenly, her torso slid forward, and then, she tumbled out. Liam staggered back, barely catching her. She was heavier than he expected, her limbs limp, her breath shallow. Then, the loudest sound of his life. A hissing roar erupted behind them. The smoke turned pitch black. Liam looked up. Flames licked the dashboard. The car was seconds away from becoming a fireball. Ignoring the burning sensation in his arms, Liam hauled her up. One step. Then another. Then, boom. The explosion sent a wave of heat and force slamming into his back, knocking him forward. The ground rushed up to meet him. For a moment, just a moment, everything spun. Then, silence. Liam lifted his head, coughing. His ears rang. His skin stung from the heat. The car was now engulfed in flames, completely consumed. If he had hesitated 1 second longer, a soft, ragged cough made him look down. The girl was still alive. Barely, but alive. Then, in the distance, the wail of sirens pierced the night. Liam exhaled, his chest rising and falling like he had just run a marathon. The flashing lights of the ambulance flickered against the trees. No one saw him. No one knew what he had done. And in a few minutes, when the paramedics took her away, she probably never would. But something in his gut told him, this wasn't over. Not even close. The steady beep 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 of machines filled the hospital room. White walls. The sharp scent of antiseptic. Sophia Reynolds blinked against the blinding fluorescent lights. Everything felt hazy, distant, wrong. Her body ached all over, like she'd been through a blender. Her head throbbed, her ribs felt like they were on fire, and her throat was painfully dry. She swallowed hard and turned her head slightly, wincing. Her mother, Evelyn Reynolds stood at the foot of the hospital bed, hands clasped like she'd been praying in secret. "Baby. Do you know where you are?" Evelyn's voice was gentle, almost afraid. "Hospital," Sophia rasped. Her mother exhaled in relief, brushing away a stray tear. "The doctors said you suffered a concussion and broke a rib. But, honey." Evelyn's voice shook. "You could have died." Sophia didn't need the reminder. The memories were flashes, quick and jagged, slipping away before she could hold onto them. The rain. The curve in the road. The sickening spin of the car. The impact. Then. Hands. Hands grabbing her. A voice, young but strong, telling her to move. Sophia's stomach twisted. "Who saved me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother hesitated. "A boy. Young. We don't know his name yet, but the paramedics said if he hadn't pulled you out when he did, you wouldn't have made it." Sophia's brows furrowed. She needed to find him. But before she could press further, the door swung open. Richard Reynolds, her father, strode in, looking as composed and polished as ever. Even here, in a hospital room, he was pristine, his custom-tailored suit unwrinkled, his salt and pepper hair perfectly combed. He didn't look like a man who had spent the night worrying over his daughter's life. "Who saved me?" Sophia repeated, this time looking straight at her father. His jaw tightened. "That's not important right now." Her stomach sank. "Dad, what do you mean?" It's handled." Handled. That word sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. Her mother, however, wasn't so dismissive. "We need to find him, Richard. We owe him." Sophia saw the way her father's expression barely flickered, but shifted just enough. He didn't like the word owe. "Let's not make this a spectacle," he said evenly. "The press is already sniffing around. The last thing we need is them turning this into a circus." Sophia's mouth went dry. Something about his tone sent a cold wave through her. The nurse entered, flipping through a clipboard. Evelyn turned to her immediately. "The paramedics. Did they say anything about the boy? Did anyone get his name?" The nurse hesitated. That pause set off alarms in Sophia's head. "You know something," she pressed. The nurse sighed. "The paramedics said the boy looked about 10 or 11. And they think he's from the south side." Silence. Sophia's mother pressed a hand to her chest. Her father's expression didn't change. But Sophia saw the subtle shift in his eyes, the flicker of something cold, calculated. South side. That was all they needed to hear. Meanwhile, across town, Liam Carter sat at the worn-out kitchen table of his grandmother's small apartment, nibbling on a piece of toast. The kitchen was tiny, cramped, and smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Bills were stacked on the counter. Across from him, Grandma Martha, who everyone in the neighborhood just called Birdie, was muttering under her breath, flipping through the mail. "You eating that toast or just holding it for decoration?" she asked without looking up. Liam took a half-hearted bite. "I'm eatin'." Birdie peered at him over her reading glasses. "You real quiet this morning." He shrugged. "Just tired." Birdie didn't push. She just sighed, rubbing the back of her neck. "I'm heading to work. Walk your sister to school. And don't let me hear about you running that mouth with them boys on the block again." Liam nodded. He was always nodding. His older sister, Ava, stomped into the kitchen, full of 12-year-old attitude. "You better not slow me down today," she grumbled, stuffing a notebook into her backpack. Liam rolled his eyes but didn't argue. 10 minutes later, they were walking toward Jefferson Elementary, sneakers bouncing off the cracked sidewalk. The neighborhood was alive with the usual sounds: dogs barking, car doors slamming, music blaring from someone's busted speaker. Liam knew every shortcut, every familiar face, every place to avoid. But today, his mind kept drifting back to last night. To the fire. The girl. Her face, pale and bloodied, barely hanging on. What was her name? Was she okay? Liam shook the thoughts away. Not my problem anymore. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. Later that afternoon, Liam sat on the worn-out basketball courts behind the school, peeling the wrapper off an hour and later candy. His best friend, Tyrell, flopped down beside him, taking a bite of his peanut butter sandwich. "You look weird," Tyrell said through a mouthful of bread. Liam frowned. "What?" "I dunno, man. Like, extra weird." Liam kicked at the dirt. "You ever do something, but you don't know if you should talk about it?" Tyrell squinted. "Like, a crime?" "No, fool." "Then what?" Liam hesitated. He knew how things worked. If you weren't somebody, nobody cared. And he wasn't somebody. But last night, for a few minutes, he had been. He sighed. "Forget it." Tyrell shrugged. Suit yourself. Liam wanted to forget it. But he couldn't. Somewhere across town, Sophia Reynolds was waking up in a hospital bed. And she had no idea who had saved her life. But that was about to change. The bell above the store door jingled, breaking the quiet hum of the afternoon. Liam Carter sat at the counter of Birdie's corner store, unwrapping a grape-flavored Now and Later, letting the candy sit on his tongue. The store smelled of coffee, floor cleaner, and the faint spice of hot sausages rotating in the old food warmer. It was a small, cluttered shop, the kind of place where people stopped for cheap cigarettes, a soda, or a conversation they didn't know they needed. Liam didn't look up. The store was always busy around this time, filled with folks coming in from work or school. He figured it was just another regular customer. Until he heard the voice. A woman's voice, clear, firm, but edged with a nervous energy. "I'm looking for a boy, about 10 years old. He would have been here last night." Liam's chewing slowed. He turned his head, just enough to see her. A woman stood near the counter, too put together for a place like this. Her dark green coat looked expensive, her blonde hair styled into soft waves, and her pearly rings screamed money. But it was her eyes that caught Liam's attention, blue, sharp, searching. Even if he hadn't seen her on the news standing beside the injured girl, he would have known exactly who she was. Evelyn Reynolds. She was looking for him. Birdie, standing behind the register, didn't look impressed. She slid a can of Arizona iced tea across the counter to a customer before finally giving Evelyn a once-over. "We got plenty of boys that age," Birdie said flatly. "You got a name?" Evelyn hesitated. "I don't," she admitted. "But my daughter, Sophia Reynolds, was in a car accident last night. A boy saved her. We need to find him." The store went still. Liam felt Birdie's eyes on him. She knew. She had known since she saw the cuts on his arms and the soot on his clothes this morning. But Birdie didn't say anything right away. She just steadied Evelyn. "Why?" Birdie finally asked. Evelyn blinked. "Excuse me? You want to find him?" Birdie said, her tone unreadable. "But for what?" Evelyn let out a slow breath, like she had been holding it in all day. "I told you, I just want to thank him." Silence. Liam already knew what Birdie was thinking. Rich people don't come down here unless they want something. Finally, Birdie turned to him. "Boy you're looking for," she said, nodding toward the counter, "is right there." Liam felt the air shift as Evelyn turned. And just like that, for the first time, Sophia Reynolds' mother was looking straight at him. Her eyes scanned him, taking in the ripped hoodie, the old sneakers, the band-aid on his arm from a cut he got last night. "You," Evelyn whispered, like she hadn't expected it to be him. Liam just popped another piece of candy into his mouth. Birdie folded her arms. "So, what exactly do you want with my grandson?" Evelyn hesitated, smoothing a hand down her perfect coat. "I told you," she said carefully. "We owe him." Birdie's eyes narrowed. "You already said that." Evelyn pursed her lips, clearly not used to being questioned. She turned back to Liam. "Would you mind coming with me?" she asked. "Sophia would like to see you." Liam stiffened. Sophia. He had wondered about her, if she was okay. If she even remembered him. But now that he was being asked to see her, he wasn't sure he wanted to. He hadn't saved her for a reward. He didn't need a medal, or a handshake, or a rich lady telling him he was special. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. Birdie was watching him now, waiting for him to decide. So Liam shrugged. "Yeah," he said, finally. "I guess." Evelyn exhaled, relieved. "I'll drive you." Birdie's hand shot up. "Hold on," she said. "I don't know you. I don't know what you're about. Liam's my grandson, and I ain't letting him go anywhere with just anyone." Evelyn's expression stiffened. "I can assure you," she said smoothly, "I mean him no harm. My daughter is in the hospital. I just want to give him the gratitude he deserves." Birdie didn't look convinced. But she didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Liam. "You sure about this?" Liam wasn't sure about anything. But he nodded. Evelyn led him outside to a sleek black SUV parked at the curb. The second she got close, the door clicked open automatically, a small, quiet flex of wealth. Liam had never been in a car like this. The inside smelled like leather and something expensive he couldn't name. The seats swallowed him up the second he sat down. Evelyn pulled out her phone as the driver pulled off. Liam stared out the window, watching as his world blurred past. The old brick buildings, the mom and pop corner stores, the kids riding rusty bikes. Then, slowly, the streets started to change. The houses got bigger. The sidewalks got cleaner. By the time they reached the hospital, Liam felt like he had stepped into another world entirely. Inside the hospital room, Sophia Reynolds lay in bed, flipping through TV channels with a bored expression. When the door opened, she turned. Then, froze. For a second, she just stared at Liam. Then her eyes widened. "It's you." Liam shifted, suddenly feeling awkward. "You remember me?" he asked. Sophia nodded slowly. "Not everything," she admitted. "But I remember your voice." She studied him, like she was trying to piece him together. "You told me to move," she whispered. Evelyn stepped aside, letting them have their moment. Sophia swallowed. "They told me what happened." "How you?" She exhaled, shaking her head. "You saved my life." Liam just shrugged. "I just did what I could." Sophia's eyes softened. "That's not just anything," she said. She studied him a little longer. Then, "You live on the south side, don't you?" Liam stiffened. He knew what she meant. What everyone meant when they said it like that. Before he could answer, the door swung open again. And the second the man walked in, Liam felt the temperature in the room drop. Because standing there, staring at him like he didn't belong, was Richard Reynolds. And for the first time, Liam realized, this wasn't just about a thank you. This was about power. And Richard Reynolds? He didn't like owing anyone, especially not a kid from the south side. The air in the hospital room shifted the moment Richard Reynolds walked in. Liam felt it instantly. It wasn't just the sharpness in the man's gaze or the way his perfectly tailored suit barely wrinkled as he moved. It was something colder, deeper. A feeling Liam knew all too well. He wasn't welcome here. Richard's eyes landed on him, scanning him like he was a problem to be solved. Like he was an equation that didn't quite add up. Sophia was the first to break the silence. "Dad," she said, straightening in bed. "This is Liam." I know who he is," Richard cut her off. The words weren't a compliment. Liam met his gaze, refusing to flinch. He'd seen that look before, on teachers, cops, the store clerks who kept an eye on him and Tyrell whenever they walked in. The kind of look that measured you up and decided, before you even spoke, exactly who you were? Richard turned to his wife. "Why is the press asking about him?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. "What? I just got a call from the Tribune," he said, irritation laced in his voice. "They want to run a story about the young hero who saved the Caldwell heiress." His gaze flickered back to Liam. "I assume you didn't go looking for attention?" Liam's stomach twisted, but he kept his face blank. "No, sir," he said evenly. Sophia sat up straighter. "So let them write it. People should know what he did." Richard wasn't convinced. He took another step forward, his presence looming. He studied Liam, his sharp eyes digging, searching for an angle. "What do you want?" Liam blinked. "Huh? What do you want in return?" Richard's tone was calm, controlled, too controlled. It took Liam a second to realize what he was asking. Money. That's what Richard thought this was about. Liam's stomach turned, but he kept his face unreadable. "I don't want nothing," Liam muttered. Richard didn't move. He just held his gaze, waiting. Then finally, he exhaled sharply, slipping his hands into his pockets. "That's fortunate." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Fortunate?" Her father didn't acknowledge her. He turned to Evelyn. "This doesn't become a story," he said, voice clipped. "We don't need reporters digging into things." His tone was final. "It's better for everyone if this stays quiet." Liam understood exactly what that meant. Richard Reynolds didn't want headlines that read, "Poor black kid saves rich white girl." Because then, people would ask questions. And men like him didn't like questions. Sophia looked like she was about to argue, but her father was already pulling out his phone, sending off a text. Evelyn's expression hardened. "Richard," she said carefully. "This boy saved our daughter's life. The least we can do is—" "I said it's handled," Richard snapped, his patience thinning. His wife flinched but didn't back down. Richard exhaled sharply, then turned back to Liam. "You should go home now," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. Liam's fingers curled into his hoodie pocket. He didn't need this man's approval. He had never needed it. But something about the way Richard dismissed him, so easily, so effortlessly, made his chest burn. Liam turned to Sophia. For the first time, she looked conflicted. "Liam, I..." But his old flip phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowning. "Grandma Birdie." He answered. "Yeah?" Her voice was tight, urgent. "Come home. Now." Liam's stomach knotted. Something was wrong. "I gotta go," he muttered, stepping back toward the door. Sophia looked disappointed. "Will I see you again?" Liam hesitated. Then, finally, he nodded once. Sophia smiled, relieved. Then he was gone. Outside the hospital, a dangerous truth unfolds. Evelyn waited until the door shut behind Liam before turning on her husband. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. Richard didn't blink. "It's a distraction," he said. "The press will turn this into something it's not." Sophia shook her head, disgusted. "Dad, you should be grateful." Richard shot her a sharp look. "I don't like being in debt," he said coolly. Sophia's stomach dropped. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about power. Before she could argue, Richard's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, his face darkening. "What is it?" Evelyn pressed. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the door, his body going rigid. Sophia followed his gaze, and felt the air leave her lungs. Because standing in the doorway, holding a manila folder thick with papers, was David Harper, her father's head of security. And the look on his face said one thing. Something was very, very wrong. Back in Southside, trouble finds Liam. Liam barely made it 2 blocks before he saw it. His street, swarmed with reporters. News vans, cameras, microphones. People were crowded around Birdie's shop, their voices a blur. Then, the questions hit him like a tidal wave. "Liam, how does it feel to be a hero? Are you expecting a reward from the Reynolds family? What was going through your mind during the rescue?" Liam's stomach dropped. They knew. Somebody had leaked his name. He pushed through the crowd, ducking under cameras, shoving past microphones, ignoring the flashing lights. The second he stepped into the store, the door slammed behind him. Birdie was on him. Her face was tight, her voice sharp. "What did you do?" Liam's chest tightened. "Nothing," he said quickly. "I didn't say nothing to nobody." "Well, somebody did," Birdie snapped. "'Cause now we got news vans camped outside, and you know what that means?" Liam swallowed. "What?" Birdie's face darkened. "It means this ain't just about you anymore." And for the first time, Liam realized the truth. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was a target. And he had just stepped right into it. Liam Carter had been called a lot of things in his life. A nobody. A troublemaker. A kid from the wrong side of town. But never a hero. And yet, when he peeked out the window at Birdie's corner store, that's exactly what the news vans and reporters wanted him to be. The problem? Heroes had targets on their backs. And tonight, Liam was realizing that the hard way. The warning he didn't see coming. The front door rattled violently as a new wave of reporters tried to push in. Birdie was already moving, locking the deadbolt and yanking the blinds shut. "You gotta be kidding me," she muttered. Liam stood frozen. He had expected some attention, but this? The sheer number of people outside, the flashing cameras, the microphones poking through the mail slot. This was insane. Birdie turned, her jaw clenched. "You let any of them put a camera in your face?" Liam shook his head quickly. "No. I just..." The store phone rang. Birdie snatched it up, still eyeing Liam. "Yeah?" she barked. A pause. Her expression darkened. Then she slowly hung up. Liam's stomach twisted. "Who was that?" Birdie was silent for a long moment. Then, in a low, controlled voice, she said. "A man called. Said you should stop talking. Said this whole thing, you savin' that girl? Ain't your story to tell." Liam's blood ran cold. "Did he say who he was?" Birdie shook her head. "Didn't have to. I know when I'm being threatened." Liam swallowed hard. A threat? But why? He hadn't talked to reporters. Hadn't said anything to anyone. So why would someone want him to shut up? Unless... His mind flashed back to the burning car. To Sophia, half conscious, barely breathing. To the way Richard Reynolds had looked at him in that hospital room, like he was an inconvenience, not a savior. To the way David Harper had stepped into the hospital with that manila folder. Something wasn't right. And now, it wasn't just about the press. Somebody wanted him to disappear. A shadow in the dark. Liam's hands were still shaking when he slipped out the back door of the shop, hood pulled over his head. Birdie had told him to stay put. But he needed air. The alley was quiet, too quiet. The usual sounds of the neighborhood, the hum of streetlights, the occasional passing car, felt distant, muted. Then he saw it. Across the street, leaning against a black sedan parked just out of the streetlight's glow, was a man in a dark suit. Watching him, Liam's pulse jumped. He took a step back. The man didn't move. Then, his phone buzzed. A blocked number. Liam hesitated, then answered. A voice, calm, controlled, and terrifyingly familiar. "I'd go back inside if I were you." Liam's breath caught in his throat. He turned back toward the store, but froze. The man was gone. Liam's heart slammed against his ribs. Someone was watching him. Someone was making sure he didn't talk. And now, he knew one thing for certain. Saving Sophia had been a mistake. Meanwhile, at the Reynolds estate, Sophia Reynolds had always known her father was a man who kept secrets. But tonight, she realized something terrifying. One of those secrets might have been the reason she almost died. She paced her massive bedroom, phone in hand, staring at the message on her screen. A text from an unknown number. "You were never supposed to survive." Her heart pounded. Who the hell would send something like that? Her hands trembled as she hit dial. The phone rang, once, twice, then clicked. "Sophia?" Liam's voice came through the other end. She exhaled. "Liam. I." But before she could say anything else, she heard it, the shuffling sound of movement. Not from Liam's end. From hers. Someone was in the house. She whipped around just as her bedroom door creaked open. A shadowed figure stood in the hallway. Sophia froze. Then, a sharp voice rang through the mansion. "David, what the hell are you doing?" Her father's voice. The shadow disappeared. Her father's footsteps pounded up the stairs. Sophia stood there, stunned. She wasn't imagining things. David Harper had just been outside her room, listening. And now, she had one horrifying thought. What if the accident wasn't an accident at all? The unseen enemy. Liam sat on the floor of his bedroom, phone still clutched in his hand. Sophia's panicked whisper echoed in his ears. "Liam, I think someone tried to kill me." Liam pressed a hand over his face. This was so much bigger than he had realized. And now, he had a choice. Walk away, stay out of it, pretend none of this was happening. Or figure out what the hell was really going on. He already knew what Birdie would say. "This ain't your fight, boy." But then he thought about Sophia's voice. How scared she had sounded. He exhaled slowly. Some things, you don't walk away from. Even when they could get you killed. And Liam? He had just chosen his side. Liam Carter had never felt fear like this before. He had been hungry. He had been tired. He had been in situations where he had to run faster or fight harder just to get through the day. But this was different. Because for the first time, Liam wasn't just trying to survive. He was being hunted. A late-night escape. The trap is set. The pounding on the store's front door rattled the walls. Birdie had barely flipped the closed sign when the knock came again, harder, angrier. She exchanged a look with Liam, then moved to the window, peeking through the blinds. Liam saw her lips press into a thin line. "It's him," she muttered. Liam's stomach clenched. David Harper. The man was standing outside, dressed in his usual sleek black suit, hands folded in front of him like he had all the time in the world. Liam backed up. "I don't like this, Birdie." "Neither do I," she muttered. Then, without warning, she unlocked the door and yanked it open. "Whatever you sellin', we don't want none," she said flatly. David Harper smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not selling anything," he said smoothly. "I just came to talk." "Funny," Birdie said, crossing her arms. "'Cause folks like you don't come down here just to talk." David exhaled, tilting his head. "We seem to have a misunderstanding." Then he turned his cold, calculating gaze to Liam. "Come outside, son. Let's clear this up." Liam's pulse thundered in his ears. Birdie moved before he could, stepping in front of Liam like a human shield. "You talk to me," she said sharply. "Boy, don't got nothing to say to you." David sighed. "That's unfortunate." Then, he reached into his coat, not for a gun, but for a folder. He tossed it onto the counter. Inside were surveillance photos. Of Liam. Of Birdie. Of their home. And one more, a grainy image of Sophia Reynolds sitting in her hospital bed, looking terrified. Birdie went still. Liam's hands curled into fists. David's voice dropped to something quieter. "There are things you don't understand, Liam. Things that powerful people don't want in the news. Sophia's accident? It was never meant to involve you." Liam's breath hitched. There it was. Confirmation. It hadn't been an accident. David leaned in slightly, his smile gone. "This is your one chance to walk away," he said. "Stay out of this, and no one gets hurt." Liam could feel Birdie watching him, waiting for him to say yes, "Okay, I'll let it go." But he couldn't. Not after what he had heard in Sophia's voice last night. Not after seeing the fear in her eyes. So he did the exact opposite of what he should have done. He looked David Harper straight in the eye and said, "Go to hell." A deadly chase, a step too far. The moment David left, Birdie spun on Liam. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped. Liam ran a hand over his face. "He's threatening Sophia, Birdie. What am I supposed to do? Pretend like it's not happening?" Birdie inhaled sharply, then dropped into her chair, rubbing her temples. "You don't get it, do you?" she said. This ain't some schoolyard fight. These men, they don't play fair. Liam knew that. But walking away? That was never an option. He pulled out his cheap, battered flip phone and typed out a single text. To Sophia. Meet me tonight. We need to talk. Her reply came instantly. Where? Liam hesitated. Then typed, the old train yard. Midnight. The meeting that changed everything. The air at the train yard was thick with rust and dust. Liam sat on an old wooden crate, flipping his now and later candy between his fingers. He was early. He always was. A few minutes later, Sophia appeared. She looked different tonight, her usual polished appearance replaced with something raw, uncertain. You're in danger, she said immediately. Liam exhaled. Yeah, I kinda got that. Sophia stepped closer. No, you don't understand. My dad, he's covering something up. I think. She hesitated, her voice dropping. I think David tried to kill me. Liam's stomach twisted. Sophia swallowed hard. I overheard him talking to my dad. He said the boy, that means you, is a liability. He's afraid you'll figure something out. Liam's hands clenched. He should have felt fear. Instead, all he felt was anger. And then, a sound. Hello, mechanical click. Liam's entire body tensed. Get down, he yelled. He grabbed Sophia and yanked her behind the rusted train car just as the first shot rang out. Bang! Metal screamed as a bullet ripped through the crate where Liam had been sitting just seconds ago. Sophia gasped. Liam's heart slammed against his ribs. They weren't just being followed. They were being hunted. Running out of time. Liam grabbed Sophia's wrist and ran. The sound of footsteps, heavy, fast, closing in behind them. Whoever was after them wasn't playing. They wanted them gone. Liam's mind raced. There had to be a way out. Then he saw it. A hole in the chain-link fence near the far end of the yard. He yanked Sophia toward it. Go, 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 he hissed. Sophia dropped to the ground and crawled through first. Liam was right behind her, until he felt something yank him back. A hand, iron strong, clamping around his hoodie. Liam gasped. He was jerked backward, slammed against the train car. Then he saw the gun. David Harper. Right in front of him. His expression was stone cold, unreadable. You should have walked away, Liam, he murmured. The gun tilted up. Liam braced himself. Then, a blur of motion. Sophia. She grabbed the rusty pipe from the ground and swung it hard. It connected with David's arm, knocking the gun loose. Liam didn't wait. He punched David in the gut and tore himself free. Then he ran, faster than he ever had. Through the fence. Into the night. Behind him, he heard David cursing, scrambling for his gun. But Liam and Sophia were already gone. The last straw. They didn't stop running until they were blocks away. Finally, Liam turned to Sophia, breathing hard. This isn't just about you anymore, he said. Sophia nodded, still shaking. I know. Liam swallowed, his chest still tight. They had pushed too far. And now? Now, there was no going back. Liam Carter had been in bad situations before. He had been chased by the neighborhood bullies. He had run from security guards after Tyrell dared him to swipe a candy bar from the gas station. He never stole again. He had even gotten cornered by cops once, just for walking home too late. But this was the first time someone had actually tried to kill him. And now, as he and Sophia sat on the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse, gasping for air, he realized something even worse. They had nowhere left to run. A night of fire, a warning too late. Birdie's in danger, Liam said suddenly, sitting up straight. Sophia's eyes snapped to him. What? They know where I live. His pulse pounded as realization sank in. David, he knows where I live, Soph. If they came after us, they'll come after her next. Sophia's face paled. Without another word, Liam was moving. He dropped down from the rooftop, landing hard on the pavement, and took off running. Sophia was right behind him. The streets of Southside were dark, the streetlights barely working. A few distant voices shouted from alleyways, but Liam's focus was locked on one thing: getting home before it was too late. But the moment he turned onto his street, his stomach dropped. Birdie's store was burning. Flames climbed up the walls, licking at the roof. Smoke curled into the night sky. Liam froze. No. No, no, no. His legs finally moved, but strong hands grabbed him before he could run forward. Stop, Liam. Sophia yanked him back just as part of the roof collapsed inward with a monstrous crash. The fire roared, swallowing everything. Neighbors stood outside in stunned silence. Firefighters struggled to control the blaze. But Liam barely heard them. His hands shook. His home. His entire life. Gone. A car pulled up fast. Tyrell jumped out, eyes wide. "Liam," he shouted, rushing over. "Man, I saw the smoke. Where's Birdie?" Liam's voice was barely a whisper. Tyrell hesitated. "Liam." Liam shoved him. "Where is she?" Then, a voice from behind. "Liam?" He turned so fast his head spun. And there she was. Birdie. Standing on the sidewalk, covered in soot but alive. Liam ran to her. She caught him, pulling him into a tight, bone-crushing hug. "You stupid boy," she muttered into his hair. "I thought you were dead." Liam clung to her. "You okay?" He choked out. Birdie pulled back, gripping his shoulders tight. "I'm fine, but listen to me." Her voice was dead serious. "This wasn't random, Liam." He swallowed hard. "I know." She nodded. "You gotta leave, baby. Right now." Liam's stomach dropped. "What?" Birdie's eyes shined with something fierce. "They ain't gonna stop, Liam. These people," she shook her head. "They don't want you talking, and now? Now they know they can't scare you into being quiet." Liam's hands curled into fists. "So what, Birdie? I just run?" "Not run," she said. "Fight smart." She turned to Sophia. "You got somewhere safe to go, girl?" Sophia nodded slowly. "My mom. She's starting to suspect something's wrong too. If we can get to her before my dad does." Birdie cut her off. "Then you better go." Liam hesitated. Leaving? That wasn't him. But staying meant more people getting hurt. Sophia grabbed his arm. "Liam," she said urgently. "We don't have time. We have to move. Now." Liam looked at Birdie, his heart breaking. She nodded. He swallowed hard. Then he turned and ran. Again. A betrayal waiting in the shadows. The car ride to the Reynolds estate was dead silent. Sophia's mom had sent a driver to pick them up. Liam sat in the back seat, hoodie pulled up, his fists clenched so tight his nails dug into his skin. Every part of him wanted to fight. To stay. To burn their whole world down the way they had burned his. But Birdie was right. If they wanted to survive, they had to play this smart. The car finally pulled up to the massive mansion, gates locking behind them. Evelyn Reynolds was waiting at the entrance. Her face was tight, her hands clasped in front of her like she was holding herself together. Sophia barely made it up the steps before Evelyn grabbed her daughter and hugged her tight. "Oh, my God. Are you okay?" she breathed. "Mom," Sophia pulled back. "We need to talk." Evelyn looked at Liam, her expression unreadable. Then, the sound of a slow clap filled the air. They all froze. From the darkened hallway, a tall figure stepped into view. Richard Reynolds. His suit was perfect. His expression? Dangerously calm. Sophia's blood ran cold. "Dad," she started. But Richard wasn't looking at her. His sharp gaze was locked onto Liam. "You just don't know when to quit, do you, son?" he murmured. Liam's jaw clenched. "Where's David?" Sophia demanded. Her father smiled slightly. "I imagine he's very busy cleaning up the mess you left behind." Sophia's hands curled into fists. "We know what you did." Her father let out a small, amused breath. "Do you?" Then he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward them. Liam's heart dropped. The screen showed a live security feed. Of Birdie. Back at her store. Sophia gasped. A man, one of Richard's security guards, was standing next to Birdie, holding a gun. "You should have walked away," Richard murmured. Liam's breath caught in his throat. "You son of a..." Richard cut in smoothly. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to disappear. Both of you." Sophia's eyes widened. "You wouldn't," she whispered. Richard gave her a chilling smile. "You don't know me at all, sweetheart." Liam's chest ached with rage. Richard turned back to him. "You leave town, son. Tonight. You keep your mouth shut, and your grandmother gets to live her peaceful little life." His eyes darkened. "But if you fight me on this..." He tilted his head toward the screen. The guard pressed the barrel of the gun against Birdie's head. Liam's entire world stopped. Richard smirked. "Well," he murmured, "you know how these things go." Liam Carter had never felt this kind of rage before. Not when the cops had thrown him and Tyrell up against a wall for looking suspicious. Not when he'd watched Birdie struggle to keep food on the table. Not even when David Harper had put a gun in his face. But this? Watching Richard Reynolds smirk while Birdie's life hung in the balance? This was different. And Liam was done playing by their rules. The choice, fight or flee? Richard tilted his head, the live security feed still glowing in the dimly lit hallway. "So," he mused, sipping his whiskey like they were discussing stock options. What's it going to be, son? You leave town, and everyone goes home safe. Or," he gestured to the screen, "you keep fighting me, and, well." Liam didn't hear the rest. Because in that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't about keeping secrets. This was about power. Richard Reynolds wasn't afraid of the truth getting out. He was afraid of looking weak. And right now? Liam wasn't weak. Richard was. Because the second you have to hold a gun to a grandmother's head to win, you already lost. A desperate gamble. Sophia's breathing was sharp, fast. "Liam," she whispered. "We don't have a choice." "Yeah, we do," he muttered. Richard arched a brow. "Oh?" Liam turned to Evelyn. "You knew," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Evelyn flinched. "Liam, you knew your husband was involved. Maybe not everything, but enough. And you still brought us here." Sophia's head snapped toward her mother, betrayal flashing in her eyes. "Mom," she breathed. Evelyn's face crumpled. I thought I could fix it before it got this far." "I didn't," Richard scoffed. "Oh, stop the dramatics, Evelyn. You knew exactly who I was when you married me." Evelyn's expression hardened. And that's when Liam saw it. That crack. That tiny fracture in her armor. He pressed forward. "You said you owed me," he told her. "You said you wanted to thank me. Here's your chance." Evelyn's hands shook. "You don't understand," she whispered. He has people everywhere. If I go against him, you're already against me," Sophia cut in. Cold. Sharp. Furious. Evelyn flinched like she'd been slapped. For a long, painful second, no one moved. Then, Richard sighed. "All right," he said, setting his drink down. "I'm bored now." He lifted his phone. And Liam saw his thumb hovering over the call button. The call that would end Birdie's life. Liam's breath caught. Then, a voice rang through the mansion. "Richard Reynolds, put your hands where I can see them." Sirens. Flashing lights. The front doors burst open. And cops flooded in. Richard whirled, eyes flashing with fury. "What the?" Then he saw who was leading them. David Harper. Richard went pale. The tables turned, the betrayal no one saw coming. David stepped forward, expression unreadable. "Sorry, boss," he said, voice smooth. "But when someone starts getting sloppy, well." He shrugged. "It's time to clean house." Richard's fists curled. "You spineless." "Save it," David cut in. "I cut a deal. I get immunity, and they get you." Liam stared. David had flipped? Sophia's mouth parted in shock. Richard gritted his teeth. "You think they'll actually protect you? I made you." David smirked. "And now I'm unmaking you." Two officers grabbed Richard, forcing his arms behind his back. Richard finally lost his cool. "You think this changes anything?" he roared. "I built this city. I own this city." He struggled, but the cops were already dragging him away. Evelyn stood frozen, hands pressed to her mouth. "Sophia?" Sophia didn't flinch. She just watched her father be hauled away like a stranger. Then, finally, she turned to Liam. "It's over," she whispered. Liam exhaled. "No," he murmured. "Not yet." The race to save Birdie. Liam and Sophia tore out of the house, bolting toward the nearest squad car. "We need to get to South Side," Sophia gasped. "Now." The cop hesitated. David, still watching from the doorway, rolled his eyes. "For God's sake, just take them," he muttered. The second the car sped off, Liam's chest felt tight, suffocating. "Please be okay. Please be okay." They raced through the city. When they skidded onto a street, Liam's heart slammed into his ribs. Because there she was. Birdie. Standing outside, alive, unharmed. And the moment she saw Liam, her face cracked into the biggest, fiercest, most relieved look he'd ever seen. Liam barely made it out of the car before she pulled him into the tightest hug of his life. "You stupid, reckless, brilliant boy," she murmured. Liam closed his eyes. He was home. The aftermath, a future worth fighting for. Richard Reynolds was sentenced to life in prison. David Harper vanished into witness protection. Evelyn Reynolds filed for divorce, taking Sophia and leaving the world of the rich behind. Sophia never looked back. And Liam? Liam Carter was no longer just a kid from the South Side. He was the kid who took down a billionaire. And yeah, people still whispered about him. Some called him lucky. Some called him a hero. But Liam didn't care. Because for the first time in his life, he felt free. And that was worth everything. Final scene, the choice that mattered. A few months later, Sophia met Liam on the basketball courts, spinning a ball on her finger. "You sure you want to stay?" she asked. Liam grinned, tossing a now and later in his mouth. "Southside's home," he said. "And I got work to do." Sophia nodded, like she had expected that answer. She tossed him the ball. Liam caught it. Then, as the sun set over the city, he smiled. Some heroes don't wear capes. Some don't ask for the spotlight. Some don't even realize they're heroes at all. But the right people see them. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Real-life lessons from Liam's story. Liam Carter's journey isn't just a thrilling story, it's a reflection of real life. In today's world, power, corruption, and injustice exist in ways both big and small. People in lower-income communities are often overlooked, underestimated, or silenced. Like Liam, many face situations where speaking the truth comes at a cost. But his story teaches us that doing the right thing, even when it's dangerous, is always worth it. One key lesson? Courage isn't about being fearless, it's about standing up even when you're scared. Liam could have run, but he fought back. In our own lives, we need to stand up for what's right, whether it's speaking out against unfairness, protecting someone in need, or refusing to let fear control us. Another takeaway? The power of community. Liam wasn't alone. Birdie, Sophia, and even unexpected allies helped him bring down corruption. We all need people who believe in us. Surround yourself with those who lift you up, and be that person for someone else. Finally, Liam's story reminds us that your past doesn't define you, your choices do. No matter where you come from, you have the power to change your future. Keep pushing forward. Your story is still being written.